So this week has just been one of me really making sure to be in God's presence. And as I've been worshiping this week, the main thing that God told me even this Sunday during service was, don't let yourself be your own hindrance. Don't be your own hindrance in this season. And our Apostle K, she prophesied that this year would be the year of the flow. And what came up in my mind during worship was like the water flowing, but me being my own dam. Me being, the blocking force to allow things to flow in my life. Because no weapon formed against me shall prosper, but we need to make sure that we're not the weapon formed against ourselves, keeping ourselves from prospering. So I had to really check myself, and especially in this season of isolation that I'm in, making sure that that hindrance isn't my mindset. And God took me to, I believe, Numbers 13, where it talks about how God was going to allow the Israelites to go into Egypt to claim the land. I mean, not Egypt, the promised land, to claim the land that he promised them back from Abraham. And, they sent 12 scouts, including like Caleb and Joshua and then all the other tribes of Israel. And when they went into this land, Caleb and Joshua said, oh yeah, we can conquer this because this is the land that we have and we have God with us. So why wouldn't we be able to conquer this land and walk into the promise? But the other 10, they said, oh man, like the people in this land are, they're so tall and the walls are so big and we feel like grasshoppers in their presence. And I know they think the same thing, but when you look at the scripture in Numbers 13, when it talks about the Anak, because these are like descendants of giants and whatnot, they never once even say that they come into contact with them. And they never said that they thought that the Israelites looked like grasshoppers. They literally made that up in their mind. They lied and spread rumors saying that they said these things. So I'm like, it really was in their mindset. And they had this mentality of being afraid, and I believe that they forgot that God was with them the entire time. And another thing that stuck out to me was when it said that they were there scouting for 40 days and nights. So it directly, in my mind, correlated to David and Goliath and Saul in that situation. I believe 1 Samuel 17, where it talks about how Saul and his army were intimidated by Goliath for like 40 days and nights as they, stood against him, and he was a giant, right? And so they were so intimidated and they were just at a standstill. But whenever David came, which is like the parallel to Caleb and Joshua, he was like, who dares defile the name of God? Who dares to speak against him and all this other stuff? And he realized that God was with him the entire time, so he wasn't afraid. So the parallel between these stories is the mentality. It's the mindset that Caleb and Joshua, with the parallel of David, had versus Saul and the 10 scouts who went into Israel. So on one hand, you have people who are so focused on the sight that they forget God. And then on the other hand, you have people who are so focused on God that it doesn't matter what they see. It doesn't matter what's in front of them, because they have the faith and belief and trust that God is with them through it all. So I really had to check myself, because lo and behold, in this story, the only people who were allowed to enter into the promised land were Caleb and Joshua, because they had that mindset that they could conquer it. And because the 10 scouts didn't believe that, and they spread the rumors and kept speaking these things over themselves, that saying that they were grasshoppers, they couldn't enter in. and they had to go into the wilderness for 40 more years. They were supposed to enter in 40 days, I believe. But because of their mentality, because they felt unworthy to leave the wilderness and too inadequate to leave the wilderness, because they forgot who they had with them, which is God, they went back into the wilderness longer than they needed to. So this is showing me that I need to have faith over what I see. Have faith over what I believe I can do in my own strength. You know, not thinking of myself as a grasshopper, but thinking of myself as one who is submitted to God's will, one who is submitted to what God sees me as, who he's revealed me as being, and the strength that I have in him, not in and of myself. So yeah, because the opposite of faith is not doubt, it's sight. And that's not the only story where Saul, had more trust in what he saw versus the God that he served. Because I believe it's 1 Samuel 13, he was talking about how basically he wasn't afraid at first because the Philistines were on the other side of the river at like Gad or something. And Samuel told Saul to wait there for 7 days. On the 7th day, Saul still wasn't worried in Gilgal, but his army, he wasn't afraid until he focused on his army and how they were trembling and afraid and all this other stuff. So his focus shifted from what, was instructed for him to do to people that were afraid. So as soon as his focus changed, he started to get worried, and he's tried to, seek all these other sources out on what to do. And I believe this is the story where he went to a witch or a medium to seek out wisdom, to seek out all these other things, instead of just waiting on God, instead of just waiting on what Samuel told him to do. And of course, as soon as he sought out the medium, as soon as he sought out something other than God, wisdom from someplace other than God, because he, wanted to rush the process, Samuel came, very shortly after, and he's like, why didn't you wait on me? And he specifically says in scripture, he saw his men afraid and trembling. He saw his men afraid and trembling. It didn't talk about, the Philistines and all this other stuff. He wasn't afraid until he saw. Because the opposite of faith is not doubt, it's sight. So yeah, just for me, just focusing has been my main concern, because your focus, what you focus on, will determine your mindset. And it'll determine your faith too. So, yeah.